Hey everyone, Internet PCS book reader here. Today I want to talk about untypical, how the world isn't built for autistic people and what we should all do about it by wharmby. It's been a while since I'm reading anything that had some educational value on mental health. The last time, if I'm not mistaken, was the Dr. K book I read, which is less about gaming addiction and more about how to raise a kid into someone who can still game but have some awareness to balance his life with doing normal people who transgress regularly in life. So I went to look for a book, but since it's not a genre that often went viral, it's harder to find one that I'm interested in. But I found this book that seems interesting, so I bought it when it went on sale at the bookstore that I went to. The world in general has never been, let's just say, good at handling autism. In the good old back in my day, in early 90s, a lot of autism is blamed at mommy, which I know doesn't make much sense. How is it her fault for giving birth to an autistic person? A lot of shame was put into the woman, and that shame didn't stop there but goes on to the person diagnosed with autism. Often they are considered unusable the moment signs of autism appear on the kids. And the media is notorious for incompetent at portraying any mental health issue, a problem that is exaggerated further after Andrew Wakefield hoax became the go-to choice for obvious hoax. Some very vocal people choose to believe in regarding autism, making an honest educated conversation about autism in general just harder. The author Pete Wemby is an English teacher who only found out quite late into his life that he had ADHD and autism and has since been the spokesperson to neurodivergency. And since I know almost next to nothing about autism, I thought I'd give the book a go. The book opened up with him introducing us to two types of person. The first one is the person who shake his hand, have a conversation, and left thinking it was a normal conversation. And the second one is the one who notice things. The awkward attempt at eye contact, the dread that you feel whether the small talk you choose will be well received or not, the fatigue of having to maintain conversation. And that second one is a person who also have autism just like him. He can fake all these things for a moment with extra energy consumption so he appears normal, but with people who have the same issue as him, both of them can feel that they're both autistic people. He met the second type, which is other autistic, quite often, but because a lot of people understanding of autism is from viral media, short clips which are mostly an abomination of misinformation, marketing manipulation to get more buyer which is also filled with misinformation, or worse, shows like the Big Bang Theory, a very badly written show that of course have misinformation about autism in the form of Sheldon Cooper, one of the characters with the most screen time on the show. It's hard to tell people that there are a lot of autistic people who are living a normal life and having a normal job because a lot of their representation on media is like this. A lot of the book is the author's personal experience, but he also added a few experiences from other autistic person that he's in communication with during about 30 years of his life to talk about life as an autistic. For example, how the author made small talk, like how to respond to how are you doing. The question is not a literal question asking for a long answer about how he is doing at the moment. Instead, it's a question waiting for the default answer, I'm fine, how about you? Like they're in a class learning English. This customary start to small talk that might or might not lead to longer conversation had a lot of ambiguity to them that autistic people have some difficulty to understand because there's not really any proper manual on how to respond to them. It doesn't help there are multiple varieties to this small talk like warm today, isn't it? Which is not an actual question about if the weather is warm or cold or how warm it is if it is indeed warm. It's just small talk which can be translated to mostly just saying hi. And small talk is just the start of autistic problem with communication because a lot of our culture of communication have this customary side to them that people are just supposed to know, despite it never being explained all that well anywhere on any day-to-day basis. There's also the white lie, which is supposed to be a good thing to do. There is also another thing that people are just supposed to know, even though lying is supposed to be a bad thing to do. Something that only bad people like politicians and criminals do. Overthinking about all this little interaction is just something that happens to a lot of autistic person because this instinctive knowledge did not exist in an autistic person as much as it did on a non-autistic person. And to make matter worse, often a non-autistic person or a neurotypical person got annoyed because an autistic person doesn't follow the rule that they should have known, instead of understanding that some people just react differently, making every interaction more dreadful, especially with a new person who you have no idea how they will respond. And that's just short form communication that took barely a few seconds. Navigating long conversation is even more difficult. On a back and forth conversation, when do you interject and start talking without cutting people off? Or if you need to cut people off, when is the right time to do so? Then how do you end a conversation? Do you say goodbye now because the conversation stopped for a moment? All these questions where the answer seems to always be depends on the situation. Add those questions with how autistic person also have a massive autistic level of getting into a certain niche that they need to share despite many people might become bored to it, and ask them to shut the fuck up if they share the intricate detail of a song or a game or a level in a game and which inspiration some of its movement it took from. And despite communication being a two-way street where two people need to walk towards each other instead of just one of them, often people in autism spectrum are the ones that had to do the hard work of understanding neurotypical person instead of both of them working to understand each other. Despite neurotypical person typically have a better understanding on navigating social interaction, so autistic often need to find way to camouflage themselves. The other cultist methods that autistics have to do as masking, in order for people to not learn that they are autistic, that they can hold eye contact in a comfortable manner, that they don't have the social skill to maneuver social interaction the way neurotypical people do. They pretend not to be one because so much shame is placed on not being able to do so. So autistic people had to learn to mask themselves as one of the neurotypical as a defensive means to not get hurt by a neurotypical person who lack empathy. Thus, an autistic person tend to try not to become the center of attention in a group and learn to stand in the back and be mute, be a wallflower that merges with the background. But of course, they are not in their natural state during interaction if they mask because they need to keep a constant vigilant act that is draining their mental and social energy faster than people who don't need to mask. And it's not just draining an autistic energy bar, but also increasing their stress level until it reaches a certain threshold that causes a breakdown. If interaction with an autistic person without breakdown is already antagonized, then an autistic breakdown is even more so. What is worse is that it is dramatic and eye-catching, so often media use it as a portrayal of an autistic person. And unfortunately, often they only capture the worst side of an autistic breakdown that is usually unkind in its portrayal. Also, once they reach their boiling point, or when they feel like they're about to reach their boiling point, an autistic person often need to go cool down and regain their composure back before they blew up and cause a scene, then cannot stop thinking about the scene they just made for a few days or weeks later. So taking your time and being patient when communicating with an autistic person is often necessary, but some people just won't do it. Especially nowadays with the demand for a quicker conversation like a phone call that already started with a startling noise before the conversation even starts, that then goes on with what is usually a demand for less awkward pauses, which left no breathing room for an autistic person for their response time that usually have a lot of pauses to think for an answer, and being hurried only make them overthink every little mistakes they made during each calls and pushing them towards their breaking point more often. Then going back to people with no empathy, the author goes on towards the persistent myth that autistic people have no empathy, like they're creatures out of horror show like psychopath or sociopath, which is also a neurological condition that is often depicted wrongfully in media. Autistic persons just often display their empathy differently. Some internalize it so deeply it doesn't show externally, and some comes out as a burst of emotion that is so raw it hurts to watch. There is also the assumption that autistics are all introverts who prefers to be a hermit, when there are actually extroverted autistics who gain energy from being with others, from having friends. It's just they also suffer from unexpected and sudden situations, which is what happened during social interaction because there is no script for them. There's also the myth that autistic people didn't have love life because of portrayal of autism in movies like Rain Man, where autistic character is not only autistic but also asexual and aromantic, which is not always the case. Autistic may have more difficulty in reading signs of flirting, but a lot of them have their love life. A lot of people who found out late that they're autistic are often parents who got diagnosed along with their children, so it's not as impossible as media portrays them to be. Meanwhile, the actual problem that autistics have, like a lot of people, is money, but even more so. Autistic tends to have difficulties on learning general skill which is needed in many jobs, while they can usually only do one thing exceedingly well, so it is hard for autistic to find a job. They can learn this general skill with much effort and time, but often those chances are taken from them. Even at school, where every noise and light and color seems to be heightened to such a degree, it's almost impossible to be an autistic. If you think group work is miserable for neurotypical, imagine being autistic and doing group work, which makes learning a lot of skill harder for them. And the book argued that there is a lot of things that need to be changed for this, and I agree with it. But I'm still really conflicted on this book. On one hand, I learned a lot about autism, but it is mostly from the author's perspective as both a person who is autistic and as an observer of other autistic. And the way the book is written feels more like a memoir of the author as a layman without any perspective from a professional. Not that you have to be a doctor to be able to talk about autism, but because there's just no technicality at all about autism in the book, it makes it difficult to tell which experience are the experience of an autistic and which ones are the life experience of one man's life. The author do try to be fair and occasionally repeat that the autistic population is not a monolith, it's just his own experience. But because most of the book is based on his personal experience, it makes it harder to navigate which is his own experience and which is an experience shared by a lot of other autistics. Unlike Dr. K that I mentioned at the start of the video, the author of this book is not a doctor who is an expert in mental health. So obviously you'll need to take what the author said with a grain of salt because it is mostly anecdotes of a single person and not a scientific case study. So the best way to approach the book should be to treat it as one person attempt at telling his experience and sharing the ways he's found on how he has managed to navigate life with his ADHD and autism, working and living in what others would typically see as normal. I do still wish there were voices from professionals in mental health in the book in order to help make the writing more compelling. For example, when YouTuber J. Aubrey, who usually make documentary about the most degenerate people, made a video with a segment containing information about pregnancy, he contacted Mama Dr. Jones, an obstetrician gynecologist doctor who also had her own YouTube channel to make sure that it had actual professional voice that made the video more compelling. This book can use some of that. And then to make the book worse, the writing is sloppy. A lot of the talking points are repeated over and over again and not in a good way. It's not like the author is trying to strengthen the previous point he made by repeating his point. It's just repetitive and unstructured, jumping from one point to another and making it difficult to keep track of what you're reading. First he's reading about learning skill, then he's talking about love life, then he's talking about the difficulty of getting job, then he's talking about difficulty in adapting to school life, then he goes back to talking about difficulty at getting jobs. It's a bit all over the place. The book can really use a better narrative progression. I'm still glad that I get to read this, but I give this a 2.25. What do you think? Let me know if I missed anything, so leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it. See ya.